All right, everybody. Welcome to the Fail Fast podcast. Today's guest is one of the top 10 social media influencers in 2017, according to Analytica. He's also a millennial keynote speaker who has worked with the Department of Defense and cybersecurity. He's helped launch digital strategies with brands like Dell, Adobe, Applebees, IBM, you name it. I would like to welcome today Brian Fanzo.
How's it going? Well, yeah, Brian Fanzo. I answer to each. Brian Fanzo. But excited to be here. Thanks for having me on. And yeah, this should be a lot of fun.
Awesome. So listen, normally I see that you're a father of 3 girls. You host 2 podcasts. You speak worldwide. You've been to over 70 countries. Normally, I would ask anybody else, like, how do you manage to do all of that? But I know how you do it. I heard you say that you adopted a mentality that is, chaos is the new normal. Is that how you do it?
That is how I do it. And I appreciate your research there. I like to say, my business life is pretty chaotic, and my personal life with 3 girls under the age of 8 is pretty chaotic. So I rather than try to fight the chaos, I decided to embrace the chaos. So I kind of live in that world of going fast and going a little bit of everywhere in every different direction. I was diagnosed ADHD at 31. And so that kind of helps because my brain thinks like that. So my business is chaos, my personal life is chaos, but my brain kind of embraces the chaos. So I do believe, change and chaos are the new normal, and I'm just kind of living it.
That's a great mentality. And your daughters are all under 8. I have 3 myself. 2 of them turned 10 months today, both of them.
Wow! Yeah. Wow! Congrats! You're really in the chaos. I'm very lucky. My youngest is 4 years old now, going on 14, and because she's the youngest, she's learning from her older sister. So I have a 4-year-old. So thankfully, no sleepless nights on that side. But man, congrats! Two at 10 months. You know the chaos better than most.
Oh, trust me, I do. It's awesome though. Great life. So you're on YouTube, you're on Twitter. I see that you're halfway through maxing out your LinkedIn connection count. That's incredible. And you've been nominated. You are on the top 50 list of social media influencers, and you were actually number 10 and number 9 on the video influencers. Well, congratulations, first of all.
Thank you.
Second, how do you do that?
So for me, it's interesting. My career is a little bit unique. I'm a computer science major. I actually worked in cybersecurity for 9 years. So I worked in cyber with the Department of Defense, helping them really facilitate collaboration between the different branches of the military. And I fell in love with collaboration, probably more so than I did the technology or cybersecurity as a whole. And so I kind of fell, it was, late 2012. I started to really focus a lot more on the marketing side of collaboration and community. I also realized quickly that marketers had budget compared to like the HR teams. And so it was around that time that I decided to go a little bit all in on social media. I actually remember it was November 3rd, 2013, November 3rd, 2013. And I decided, you know what, I'm just going to tell my story on all the different channels, and I'm going to go all in on social media. And that was kind of the start for me. And I can say, I am a little bit of everywhere. There's no social network that I don't have a presence on. I kind of pride myself, for my clients, I help them decide which social networks to be on that's for them, like what's the best for them. But how do I know what's the best if I'm not on everything? So I don't tell people to practice what I preach. I'm on Tumblr and Pinterest and SlideShare and you name it. I'm on Musical.ly, I have Snapchat. But for me, I love it. I absolutely love telling stories. I love engaging communities, and I don't believe I'd be able to do as much as I do on social networking more so than anything else if I didn't love it. I get up in the morning and I'm excited to check Instagram DMs. I'm excited to tell stories on YouTube. LinkedIn has been my number one focus for the last about 9 months. I've been pretty heavy on LinkedIn for about 2 years, but the last 9 months, I've been making a much more strategic effort on that platform. So for me, it's a little bit of I found my passion, and my passion being leveraging the power of social media. And I tell everybody this, but I believe that we're living in the greatest time in the world. I think thanks to social networking and social media apps like Facebook and LinkedIn, it doesn't matter where you live. I live outside Washington, D.C., here in the United States. And it doesn't matter where you live, what your background is, what your resume is. We have the ability to connect with people around the world. And I think every generation before us would have killed for this opportunity. And so that's part of the reason what excites me is because I don't even have to known you, met you. I could just have discovered you, and we're able to connect via social media and do some great things together. And that's kind of what keeps me up at night, but it's also what gets me up in the morning excited to do what I do.
It's absolutely true. I love it. I love it. I feel the same way. Like, we are so blessed to have this ability to connect, to start a business without leaving your room. Like, it's so fantastic. And now that you're on all platforms, which one, we know Facebook is the 500-pound gorilla. We all know that for marketing purposes. And branding, of course, you are a brand yourself. Which one is your favorite of all of them?
Ooh, that's a good question. That's Twitter has changed my business and life probably the most. Twitter, I really like Twitter from the standpoint, and this is how I pitch Twitter to people, because some people, it's weird with 140 characters. Now it's 280 characters. But the reason I like Twitter is every other platform, no matter what it is, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, the way that you grow your following is that people are friends of friends, right? Like, you're on Facebook. The only way that you can read my content is that you have to be a friend of mine, or you friend request me, or a friend of a friend, or that's how we kind of discover content. But the thing about Twitter is I call Twitter the global fire hose of community. Because it doesn't matter if you don't know me, you don't like me, you've never heard of me. If you're on Twitter and you search a hashtag, like, for a sporting event, or maybe like today, we're recording this on a Tuesday, and today is Thoughtful Tuesday, right? And so if you look at the hashtag Thoughtful Tuesday on Twitter, you can read all of this content from people that you aren't friends with, you don't know, and you can become inspired. And I oftentimes, people will find me and say, Brian, I've never heard of you. I don't even know who you are, but you sent this tweet about this, and it really meant something to me. And so Twitter has really been my favorite platform for a long time. It's really allowed me to grow. But I will say the storytelling, I'm a marketer. And so, the thing about being a marketer is you follow other marketers on social media, and that's annoying. And it's really, really bad because there's a lot of bad marketers, but marketers are really good at marketing. And sometimes you just want to get on social media and not be marketed to. And like, when I sounds like a kind of a normal thing, but for someone that's in the industry, I've recently fell in love with Instagram. I'd say for the last year, Instagram is my favorite platform for personal enjoyment. So the platform that I leverage the most, that's allowed me to travel to 70 countries, has been Twitter. The platform I get most excited about using on a daily basis is definitely Instagram. I just really love Instagram stories. I like Instagram Live. And I like that marketers can't really ruin it, right? There's only one link that you get in your bio. They can't just blast a bunch of crap into your platform. So the easy, long answer to that is love Twitter to reach people that don't know who I am. But my most enjoyable platform at the moment is definitely Instagram.
Awesome. I agree with Twitter 100%. For the longest time, I had a Twitter account and I didn't use it for many years. And then recently I started using Twitter, and I realized what you just said. It's so fantastic that people can find me and I can find anybody. And next thing I know, I'm talking to Lewis House and Eric Thomas. I'm trying to get Eric Thomas to come on the show. And there's, like, Twitter, a lot of people I talk with don't even have Twitter accounts. And because they think exactly what I used to think until, a year or so ago, what is it? You're just going to go there and read somebody's 140 characters, which are not 140 anymore. But that's not all it is. It's fantastic. And then Instagram, like you said, do you get lost there?
Of course. Yeah, I definitely, I'm very, like I said before, the ADHD side of me, sometimes I just get caught down a rabbit hole. So oftentimes I track my time during the day as an entrepreneur. So I'll put a timer on and say, like, hey, 8 minutes to work on this graphic or 10 minutes to edit this video. And sometimes I need to do that on my Instagram as well. I'm probably not as good about it as I should. I actually like Instagram stories, the 10-second stories across the top, even more than the feed. So I'll often find myself kind of scrolling through the stories. But yeah, like you said, Twitter. And for those that are listening to your show that maybe aren't on Twitter, Twitter today is way different than it was 3 years ago. And it's even different than it was 9 years ago, right? I was on the platform early on, and I only cared about it. I'm a Pittsburgh sports fan, and I left Pittsburgh in my teenage years. And so for me, it allowed me to connect and have conversations with all of my fellow friends that were still in Pittsburgh, right? Talking about Pittsburgh sports. But it wasn't until I started to realize things like Twitter chats and following hashtags. And I will say right now, I think Twitter, the thing about Twitter is they're really bad at marketing themselves, teaching people how to use the platform. But if people can find different ways to be creative on the platform, Twitter is pretty amazing. But Twitter, just like everything else, it's about the time that you put in. Like when people tell me sometimes, like, well, I had a Twitter account, I really didn't like it, I prefer Facebook. And I'm like, well, how many minutes of your day do you spend on Facebook? And they're like, well, 25 to 30, which they're probably lying.
Yeah.
It's probably like an hour to an hour and a half. And then I say, well, how much time did you spend on Twitter when you were learning Twitter? And they would say 5 minutes, right? And so it's one of those things, like, if you want to be good at something, especially with this ever-changing environment that we live in today, you have to invest the time. And so I'm not a huge fan of spending your time everywhere, because that's what I do for a living. But if you do invest the time, especially right now at this moment, I think Twitter can have some massive value for not only your business, but for thought leadership, for finding your people, for realizing you're not alone. Little things like mental health awareness month is going on this month. And I can tell you, I have that hashtag on one of my feeds, and it's amazing how many people are sharing stories and inspiring other people. And I just kind of wish that more people were able to embrace that, and from the platform perspective. But yeah, Twitter is definitely an interesting animal, that's for sure.
Absolutely. So Brian, you mentioned how you time yourself when you're doing certain jobs. How do you do that? Do you use like Pomodoro techniques, or do you have an app, or you just
So weirdly enough, and I'm going to say her name, I use Alexa. So I just literally talk out loud, and I say, Alexa, set timer for 25 minutes. And oh, she didn't hear me. That's good. And she does it. And so that's one of the things too. I've learned, like, for me, keep it simple, stupid, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Like, I have lots of tools. I have more apps. I'm a computer science major. I have more gadgets and stuff that I could ever get. Most people are overwhelmed just by like the little things that I have. But the other thing I realized was that if I don't simplify my process, I will never use it, right? If I have to open up an app to get into an app, to set a timer or do something, oftentimes I don't do it. So for me, it's about how do I simplify things, right? And so that's why the Amazon Alexa works really well for me, because I can just talk to it, set the timer, and go, and then it plays. It actually, I customize the alarm, so like it'll right now I think it has Missy Elliott, and Missy Elliott tells me, "Yo, stop doing your work. It's time to move on," or something crazy.
Wow.
But I think everyone has to find what works best for them, and for me, it's definitely about a simple solution like a talking speaker.
Very good. Alexa is actually one of the few I have not tried myself. I have, Cortana, Siri, and just because I'm a PC guy and this is only temporary, I'm thinking of changing to Mac just because of the forceful updates. And man, anyway, that's another story.
So, my company's name is iSocialFanz, and that's kind of my personal brand. Everyone knows me on social media. And that lowercase I is because I'm an Apple fanboy. So for iPhone, iPad, and so that's iSocialFanz. So everything, I'm all in everything Apple and Mac. Now I do own, I have 3 phones because of my job with video live streaming. And I do have a Samsung S7 that I use as well. But yeah, I'm all in Apple everything.
Very good. Now, talking about your brand, there's something I noticed, which is the FOMO, F-O-M-O. And I really love that because I know the fear of missing out is one of the biggest fears humans have, or that actually they're not born with it. We create that after. So tell me more about that. How'd you get into that?
So, I was always, people actually referred to me, like they would introduce me on stage as the FOMO guy. And they would always say, like, if you want to know about the bleeding edge technology, if you want to know about the newest, Snapchat spectacles, or if you want to know what artificial intelligence was, or augmented reality, virtual reality, people would always come to me. And that became kind of my thing. And I love living on the bleeding edge. I love testing out new technology. I jailbreak my iPhone. I'm using the beta software of the Macintosh software. So I love that bleeding edge. And what I did was I started to realize, like, okay, I want to help other people embrace the fear of missing out like I do, right? And I spent about a year really working hard with content and different things out there. And I realized, first of all, not many people like living on the bleeding edge of change like I do. And so many people were so overwhelmed by the fear of missing out that they were almost, they were so turned off that they would rather not know than learn at their own pace. And so I launched a podcast called FOMO Fans, the Fear of Missing Out Fans. And the goal of that podcast is simply every week for 30 minutes or so, I cure your fear of missing out, right? So I flipped it on its head. I was trying to get people to embrace their fear of missing out. And now I said, okay, if people don't want to embrace it, because that's where I was living, how do I help them cure it, right? And so, and like I said earlier, I'm on every social network. I have 2 podcasts. I create, I've done over 1,300 live videos in the last 2.5 years. And so I create a lot of content, a lot of content. And that also creates FOMO for my fans, right? And for my community. And so I've told them, if there's one place that you can go, if there's one place that you want to, it's my podcast. And I truly love podcasting. I'm a big podcast consumer. I've been a guest on a little over 150 podcasts myself. And not to mention, I've hosted now a little over 300 podcasts between the 2 that I have. So for me, I love all of these channels, but I created that podcast to help cure people's fear of missing out, because I think oftentimes people aren't scared of the new technology. They're scared more of change. And if I can help them have an open mind to change, then they can embrace things like Twitter or embrace things like artificial intelligence. But if they are closed-minded and they're just living in that fear, they'll never open their mind to these new possibilities. And I really do believe the world is changing so fast today, right now, as we see it, that if you're not open mind to change, or if you're not embracing what the heck's going on, you're gonna get ran over. And I think before it was, well, if I don't embrace change, if I don't buy a DVD player, I could still use my VHS tapes, right? But now, if you don't buy something today, not only is it going to be going away in a couple of years, but we're probably going to move on to another technology that you won't even understand if you don't start now. So the FOMO for me is I went from trying to get people to embrace FOMO to trying to cure their fear of missing out now. And it's been beyond inspiring. I can tell you the amount of emails that I get for people telling me I changed their life, or I inspire them to do different things. And like you said, it's fear of missing out is kind of self-invoked by our digital world that we live in today. But I don't think it has to be traditionally a bad thing. It just has to be something that people figure out a way to manage.
Very good. And you don't think that by curing people's FOMO, that as a marketer, we can use that fear of missing out to actually market people, and that's where the scarcity techniques come in. The clocks, the countdowns. Do you agree with those?
So I think for the longest time they've worked. I think for the last 7 or so years, those fear of missing out tactics have worked, right? Like the idea of sending an email and saying only 20 left, and then an email tomorrow, only 10 left, when everyone knows damn well there's 100 left or 200 left. But here's the thing about that is, I believe consumers have been dumb, and go bear with me for a second. Consumers have been dumb for a long time, right? We were blind to marketing and advertising. We didn't understand a lot of times, but we've seen things, even like the Facebook data privacy breach, right? All of a sudden, all of these people that were like, wait a second, I've been using Facebook for free. I didn't realize I was paying with it with my data. What does that mean for me? And so I will actually say that I don't believe in 2019 and beyond the fear of missing out marketing tactics will work anymore. I think consumers see right through it. It's even like brand placement, right? Just because a celebrity is driving a specific car on a TV show, we don't just buy that car all of a sudden because they're like, wow, they must like that car. No, today's consumer goes, they must have paid him the most money to drive that car, right? And so today's consumers are smart. I would say they're not, I would say the fact that we saw the Congress questioning Mark Zuckerberg, and that proved that, humans are not smart as a whole, because that line of questioning was atrocious. But I think if we look at it, I think, over the next couple of years, marketers, and this is something I talk about a lot. This is, I speak around the world. And one of the things I say is that we have to start talking with our community and our consumers, not talking at them. Because we've been talking at them, we've been trying to trick them with clickbaiting and sign up for this email address, to download this free product, and then they sign up for it, and then we spam them with a bunch of crap. Well, I think those tactics are dead. I think they're not dead, they're dying. They're going to be dead very soon, and we're going to start to really have to put up or shut up, right? The idea of countdown clocks and things are going to go away. But I will say they've worked today, and for people listening that are using those techniques, I'm not saying that they were wrong. I'm just saying that today's consumers are now smarter. So we're gonna have to start doing something a little different, because times are changing.
Absolutely, and I love the way you think, and I agree with it 100%. People are getting smarter, and they can see right through those. To the point that somebody contacted me on LinkedIn, and their message, at first I thought right away was another spam message. They started by saying, "I'm not going to try to sell you anything." And when somebody says that, I know they're going to try to sell me something. And his second sentence said, "Bullshit. I'm going to try to sell you something." And instead of deleting, I started reading the rest. And I thought, this guy's a genius. And I actually replied to him, because he's so honest that that's the reason why I read the rest of the email. And I actually may do some business with him, because what he had to sell did matter to me, and I didn't need those services. But if he continued with, "I'm not here trying to sell you something," and then try to sell, I would have seen through it, and I wouldn't have dealt with him, right? So that's what you were saying about finding new techniques. And
for sure. And I think also transparency is extremely important. There's every stage that I go on, I ask two questions to the audience. I ask them, can you name me a brand that you believe is perfect? And no one ever raises their hand. I think I've asked that about 100 times, and I've had 0 people raise their hand. And then I say, okay, name me a person or a leader or an executive that you know is perfect. And sometimes people will say, like, Mother Teresa, right? And like, even Mother Teresa wouldn't say that she was perfect, but then no one raises their hand, right? So in this world we're living in today, it's weird that we've tried to portray ourselves as perfect brands, perfect marketers, writing the perfect email, yet every person I've ever asked can't name someone that they think is perfect. And so in this new world we're getting at, it's gonna be less about tricking people into doing things or making claims and then going back on it, and it's gonna be more about, how do I build trust and how I transparently put things out there. A lot of times for me, I will have people that will come to me and ask me, "Brian, I want you to be an influencer. I want you to, hawk this product, or I want you to use this software and talk about it on your podcast," or whatever it is. And I have to come back to them and say, "I don't think that's a good fit." And most of the time they're surprised by that, right? Because people aren't used to turning it down. But I've for the longest time believed that, building trust in a community is extremely hard. But losing it is very easy, right? One bad product, one thing that you're scamming people on, misusing people's data. And so I value that. I think every business should. And so doing certain things like not BSing everybody when you're sending emails, right? Or putting it out there like, "Hey, I want you to sign up for this." On my email newsletter, I've never had an opt-in. There's never been a download for someone to opt into my email. It simply says, if you want to cure your fear of missing out and you want to stay up to date with what I have going on, sign up to my email newsletter. And that is all I say. There's no pitch, there's no trick, there's no like, get on there and I give you 5 hours free of my course. I don't do any of that, because I want the people that sign up to my email newsletter to get what they expect, right? And yes, my email newsletter is much smaller than others, but I will tell you, my open rate will crush other people's. My engagement on my emails will crush other people's. And the reason that is because I'm not tricking them into getting something that they didn't expect. I'm truly am trying to provide value at a level through honesty and transparency. And I think that's where marketing is going as a whole, which I think is really exciting.
That is the way to go. And I believe Jessica Alba may have figured that out when she created that Honest company.
Yes,
And
she did. I couldn't agree more.
yeah, and that is what they call the unicorns, right? It becomes,
Yes.
and that's just, I guess, yeah, she did figure it out like a lot of people did. So tell me about all this content that you provide, and you've been over 70 countries, and I saw you speak at the NSA. Uh, Man, how is that? Is there any special security going in? You get
Well, actually, it was the other NSA. So it was the National Speakers Association.
okay.
Now, the funny part is I worked in the Department of Defense. I actually worked out of the Pentagon for 4 years. So I did 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. So when I put out there that I was speaking at NSA, almost all of my connections were like, wait a second, what are you doing? But yeah, I actually spoke at the winter conference for the National Speakers Association. But yeah, I just got back from Scotland 2 days ago. I spoke at an event there in Scotland. I was in Poland the week before, Newcastle, UK the week before that. I love being able to speak around the world. For me, going around the world is also a great reminder of sometimes in the US, we get kind of stuck in our own marketing bubble, and we like to claim that we're better than other people and we do things better than everybody else. But then I'll go to other countries and I'll be impressed by the way they're doing digital advertising, or maybe the way they're doing email sign up, or even some of their local brick and mortar stores. So I love traveling the world. It's truly it's an honor. And my favorite place in the world with everything I do is being on stage, and the fact I get to be on stage full time as my job is a pretty cool opportunity. That's for sure.
So tell me, you speak to hundreds, thousands of people at one time. And I've seen you've been at the social media marketing world, which is one of the biggest events there is. And were you always, you can see you're a confident person. Were you always confident? How did you do this?
Ooh, that's a great one. So for me, growing up, I was kind of like the unique, and I won't say unicorn because unicorn sounds like but I was the weird one where, in high school, I was part of the theater club. I played on the baseball team. I DJ'd at a skating rink, and I worked at my parents' frozen yogurt shop. And I was a lifeguard that surfed every morning before school in Virginia Beach. When I went to college, I was a computer science major that played on the hockey team and was also in a fraternity. And I can tell you, nobody that was in my fraternity played hockey. Nobody that I played hockey with was a computer science major, and nobody that I was a computer science major was in a fraternity or played hockey, right? So I've always been kind of one that walks my own path. I really like being able to relate with everyone. But for me, to answer that question, I've always been outgoing. I've always been an extrovert from all intents and purposes. But there was a path in my career, and this kind of goes into a little bit of failure, but a little bit of adjusting as I went, is that I talked about me getting into social media in 2012 full-time as like a job, but I can tell you I was getting burnt out by about 2013, 2014. I was really getting burnt out. Like, what should I post on Facebook, or what do other people want me to hear on Twitter, or what do I need to do on LinkedIn? And what happened was my mom, actually, I give my mom a lot of credit, is my mom, I was talking to her on the phone, and she said, she's like, son, what you do really well and what you've always done really well is you've always stayed true to yourself. You've always done it your way. And she was like, I think part of the reason that you're getting overwhelmed is you're forgetting that when you do stuff online. And I can tell you, I remember I wrote on my mirror in my bathroom, I wrote the words, be yourself in giant capitals. I wear it as a wristband on my wrist right now. I see it every day. And that changed everything for me, because I am extremely confident on stage. I love being on stage. Now, I practiced a lot of, the amount of times, I've done well over 200 events in the last 3 years. So I've been on a lot of stages, but so I'm refining my craft. But what I figured out was, when I'm able to be myself, right, wear my shirts, I'm a backwards hat wearing guy. I love to have a hat on. I wear my own crazy style shoes, and when I was able to be myself everywhere, all of this came easy, right? And so I like to say, like, there's that weird spot between confidence and ego. And for me, the difference is I don't believe I know everything, and I actually don't believe I'm an expert in any one area. But what I do know is that I'm really good at telling stories and relating content and conversation to people, right? So, I was in Scotland, I was in Poland, I was in Newcastle, and the week before that, I was in Baltimore. And for me, each presentation had the same title, but my job was to make the content relatable to the audience. And that's what I became really good at. I like to say, my tagline is, I translate the geek speak. And so I can take stuff like artificial intelligence and I can make it relative to my mom, or I can help a group of developers understand how they can code to it, right? And so that's really where I found my confidence. And I will say, if I wasn't being myself 100% always, that confidence wouldn't be there. It would be a lot harder for me to get on stages. But getting on stages doesn't scare me at all. And mainly that's because I know that I'm going to be myself 100%.
Very good. I hear a lot talk about the imposter syndrome when the person doesn't feel that they're good enough to give advice and stuff like that. And I believe the reason is because the person doesn't become themselves, just like you. And a lot of people are afraid to say, I don't know. And if you do, like you said, if you can say, I don't know, then you don't need to have the imposter syndrome, because if you don't know something, you don't know it. And before we go anywhere, let me congratulate your mom, because that was beautiful advice. That was fantastic, man.
Yeah, I'm a mama's boy too, and like my parents aren't into social media, and even my dad's a big sales guy, and he never understood social, but they've always understood people, right? And it's funny that some of the best advice you can get on how to be good on social media are probably from people that aren't on social media, that are people that just know people, and that's what I'm lucky to have, a great parents that kind of have guided me down that path.
Yeah, you just have to be ready to hear it and to listen. Yeah. So I heard a story about a video you did for Applebees. Did it get over 1 billion page views? Was it page views that it got?
So it was 1 billion impressions. So what we did is I worked with 2 other people and actually a giant agency, and we did what they called Taste the Change. And so for an entire day, for about 12 hours, if you went to Applebees.com, you would see my beautiful face and 2 others. And we were hosting like an all-day marathon, kind of like the new version of those old telephone marathons. And what we did was we invited 20 different influencers in their hometown. We gave them a gift card, and we told them to go to their local Applebees and live stream their experience, right? And then what we did is we were on Applebees.com, and we brought in all these people that were live streaming. So we had a mom and dad with their kid go to the restaurant. We had 3 guys after work go there and have beers. And the idea was, how do we connect influencers and influencer content and bring people in? And Applebee's was amazing, because what they knew was that if people hadn't been to their restaurant in the last 2 years and they went back in, they would have a positive experience. So Applebee's gave us a lot of leadway, and they pretty much said, like, we trust that our food is much better than what people remember it being. We also trust in our experience. And for them, worst case scenario was, if people start sharing a bad experience, that's a lesson learned for us, right? So what we did was we did a 12-hour takeover on all these social network accounts. And I mean, literally we were on video for 12 hours. It was one of the longest days I've ever had, but it was pretty cool. Over 1 billion impressions on the hashtag Taste the Change. So if anybody wants to check out that, it was in the summer of 2016. But yeah, if you just look up the hashtag Taste the Change, and you can see all the great content we created. And for me, one of the best parts about it was working with a great brand like Applebee's that was able to kind of trust us to do our thing. But the other cool thing about it is the amount of people that were now going to Applebee's with an open mind proved the power of influencer marketing. It proved the power of video. And yeah, it was one of the cooler projects. I got to work with the Super Bowl in the January of 2017. But I would say the Super Bowl and Applebee's are probably 2 of the coolest projects I've ever had the opportunity to work on.
That's fantastic. That's good to know. I've seen that you work with huge companies like IBM, Adobe, HP. You work with them in the tech side, or did you actually go there to speak to them?
So a little bit of all of it, right? I was brought in mostly as an influencer, right? I worked in cloud computing and cybersecurity, so they would bring me to their event, give me access to different things, and then I would blog about it or do a video about it. And then I became kind of more of a trusted asset, right? And then I became more of a thought leader on certain topics. And so now I get to go back and do a lot of speaking at these events, and even some of them hire me to bring in other influencers. So it's kind of fun because I've gone full circle. I was an influencer to start with. I've done influencer strategies for them, and I now do some thought leadership, keynote speaking for their events as well. So it's very, I'm very blessed to work with some giant, technology brands, technology being my background. But, working with those big brands, it's funny, most of the time they have the same problems as small brands. They just have it at a bigger scale and sometimes have a bigger budget. But for the most part, I've had the luxury of working with some amazing people at these amazing companies, and it's fun. I get to go. I'll be going to a Dell event in a couple of weeks, and my whole goal of going to that event is to open their mind on how they can tell the story of Dell and connect with millennial and Gen Z consumers. And so being able to have that challenge is it's a lot of fun and something I look forward to each time I work with these big brands.
Did you ever find any issues in going to these big brands? And there's a lot of, I guess, older minds there too, right? Did you ever have any problem? There's this young kid here with the hat backwards speaking to us. Did you ever have that mentality?
Every day. I still do, right? And for most part, I've learned, one of the things with change is that you can't force people to change. You have to teach them, you have to inspire them, but most of all, you have to do it yourself, right? I would tell them that, hey, if you want to relate with younger generations, you need to bring on, someone that can talk to the younger generation, someone that looks like them. And they would hear it, but they would not live it, right? And I end up being the guinea pig lots of times. And a perfect example of this is for about 2 years, I would have to sneak my hat on stage, right? So and for me, wearing a hat is just kind of part of my brand. And so I would not have a hat on backstage. And before I go on stage, I'd throw the hat on. And for the longest time, that was something for me that just meant something for me, right? I was helping them embrace change a little bit. And then about 1.5 years ago, people started writing into my contracts, Brian, we want to hire you, but you must wear your hat on stage, right? So I had embraced their change. And this is one of those things as well, is that changing for change's sake doesn't matter. And just because you want to relate, just wearing a hat on stage doesn't mean that you're doing something differently, right? But giving people the opportunity to be themselves. Right? One of my favorite stories is that, IBM always was blue suits and blue ties, and they made all of their employees wear ties. And then last year I went to an event and they actually outlawed ties. If you wore a tie into their convention that they were having on, they were going to cut the tie right off your neck. And that was to them saying, hey, we want you to relax. We want you to be more of yourself. And so I love helping that change be facilitated. But don't get me wrong, there's still companies that will call me and say, Brian, I want to work with you, but I need you to do A, B, and C, or I'm scared of what you're going to talk about, or, can you give me your slides ahead of time so that I can make sure that you don't do something that we don't want. And, it's a delicate balance because for me, I have to help them change. But at the same time, if I alienate them or polarize them so much that they don't work with me, I didn't help them and I didn't help myself. And so it is a balance on a regular basis. I can tell you the call that I have directly after this podcast is with a company in an older industry. And they came to me and just said, Brian, we need you. And we are so far behind the times. And I will tell you, it's taken 3 months for us to execute on something because they are behind the times, but I have a change agent within it. And I guess that's my lesson learned, is that you have to find somebody within the company that believes in you outside the company. And I've been so blessed. I could probably name 30 people that are in 30 different companies that without them inside of the company being my champion, as much as I'm great at what I do, I would have never been successful. But it's a constant evolution, right? And nobody likes being told what to do. Nobody likes being generalized. And really, no one likes being forced to change. And what I try to do is I try to do 3 things. I try to inspire change. I try to educate change, and then hopefully motivate change through my actions.
Awesome. And how do you gain how do you remember actually your speeches? Do you actually write down a speech and then to present it?
So I think, this is interesting because I think, for me, I do it a little bit different than everybody else. Right. And I work with a lot of speakers and a lot of it's, practice, but, because I have a podcast, because I do a lot of live videos, I cover a lot of my topics over and over again. So I do practice, but I make all of my own content, right? I edit all of my own podcasts. Every blog that's on my site, I've written. Every tweet that ever been replied has been replied by me. And so because I'm so in it, when I get on stage, I don't have to have a script as much as I deliver, based on the audience. But so I build my slides, like you'll notice my slides don't have very many words on them. They'll have maybe one word. It'll say transparency or relatability or virtual reality or whatever the slide says. And then I allow the audience to kind of allow the story to come with me. But I do have an idea of what I'm going to say on all of those. And it's all about practice. Like, as many stages I've been on, I mean, this year alone, I've been on 31 stages so far in 2018. And there's a presentation that I've been giving a lot recently. The Press the Damn Button is the name of the presentation. And I just gave it last week in Scotland, and it's the best I've ever given that presentation. And it's because I've given it 15 or 20 times this year alone, and now I have the cadence down, right? And, I use pauses, right? So I will say something, and I will pause really long to let the audience kind of get it. And all of those things take a lot of practice and a lot of experience. And it's a funny business. Speaking is funny because you get more speaking gigs by getting on stage, but you get on stage. How do you get on stage in the first place? It's hard. There's no like one way to do it. And so for me, I take every opportunity that I get, no matter if it's a 20-person stage or I've spoke twice in front of 13,000 people. I treat each audience the same in the sense of delivering my very best no matter what. But it is about getting lots of experience on that stage, that's for sure.
Very good. And right in front of me, I have a book called Speak with Power. And this is a Canadian bestseller by Betty Cooper. Is there any book that influenced you or helped you? Which one is it the most?
Sure. So there was actually two books that kind of, I'm going to give you 3 books total because I can't just give one. But I'm going to give you 2 books that helped me get into marketing and really opened my mind. And the first one is from Gary Vaynerchuk, Jab, 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 Right Hook. I wouldn't consider myself a marketer. I was consider myself a storyteller and community person. And that book, it opened my mind to realize that you can give before making a sale. And that's kind of how I lived. And it was funny. I read that book at the exact same time I was reading Jay Baer wrote a book called Utility, Y-O-U-Tility. So it's utility as like you, the person being the utility. I actually read that book the exact same month. I had one on Kindle, one on hard copy. And I read that book the same month. I remember actually finishing one of them at the pool and going, wow, I want to be a marketer. Wow, I really want to get in there. So those 2 books kind of opened my mind to this whole arena that I'm in. And then just recently in the last, it was January. So 6 months ago, I read a book called Know Exactly What to Say. And it's written by Phil Jones, Know Exactly What to Say. It's a very short book. And transparency, I read the book. It blew my mind. I took some of his practices and I put him into action. And then I hired him as a business coach because he's that impactful. But it's a short, easy read. I mean, I read it in probably an hour and a half. But it talks about, how do you put things out there into the world so that they not only relate with people correctly, but they get people to take action in the way that you want. So for me, selling has always been a hard thing. I'm great at marketing myself, but closing a sale is something I've struggled at because I love it and I want it, and often I'm the first one that talks first and all the things that I do wrong. But that book, Know Exactly What to Say, I can tell you, like, I would say my business has increased 70% because I read that book and I hired Phil as a business coach. So if that's not a testimonial, I don't really know one. And he's a good friend now because we've been working together. But those are the 3 books. So Jab, 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 Right Hook, Gary V, Utility by Jay Baer, and then Know Exactly What to Say by Phil Jones.
Very good. And if anybody in the audience listening, if they want to contact you, where do they find you? Everywhere.
So, consistency is a big deal, right? So in this world, if anyone's listening to this, I talk really fast. So hopefully you're not listening to it at 1.5 speed on your podcast. By now, you probably realize that. People are like, wow, it sounds like Mickey Mouse. But, with all the digital noise, I always tell people consistency is extremely important. So I am iSocialFanz, lowercase I, social fans with a Z or a Z at the end on every channel, every social network. I'm iSocialFanz. My website is iSocialFanz.com. And I can almost promise you, you can check it out on Tumblr, on YouTube, no matter where you're at. If you search iSocialFanz, even your podcasting players, you'll find me. And that's kind of, I try to make it as simple as possible in this crazy digital world. And, that's the easiest way to track me down.
Very good. Brian, this was fantastic. I know you have to go. You got a call now. I just want to thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it and love talking to you.
My pleasure. Lots of fun. Thanks for having me.
No problem, buddy.
Cheers.
Bye.